Before we begin our video for today, we're going to really need to talk about safety involving the knees, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about first prevention to make sure it doesn't get injured, and then what to do if it does start to feel like you have some soreness or some kind of things that are going on from not practicing correctly or from previous injuries. When I bend down, generally, if you're watching here, watching my hips, if I bend down, all of that weight now bending goes right directly into my knees. So anytime I do any kind of a bend, it is very important that I bend correctly, which is why we always have the same rules that we say, tuck in the butt. So by tucking in, I'll show you here, my butt here is out now, and if I bend, that force goes onto my knees. If I tuck in my butt this way, now when I bend, I keep that flexed, and where I feel that pressure now is actually on my hip flexors here, in this area here. So instead of feeling any pressure here, there's basically a bow that's been created, and when I bend down and flex, there's no pressure here on these knees. Now, when you go down, you'll feel that you're limited. You can't go down any lower. So in order to go lower, this is going to have to stretch, and that's going to take time. So initially when you do movements, it's not going to let you go low until you get more flexible here. And now you'll see that I bend all the way down and all the way back up, but none of that pressure ever goes to my knees. With all of the stances, it's very important that you keep that posture, that you keep that tucked in, and then flex those muscles so that all the pressure is on that hip flexor, what they call the quad. That way the sinking, it creates a spring instead of a force that goes into your knees, into your joints. That's the first part. That takes time. It's like what they say is like a flower. You can't just pull the petals apart. So when you're doing any motion initially, please practice at a higher elevated level. I'll show you the techniques in the lower position. I'll show you some higher, but the lower position, so that when you get to that moment, you'll understand how to practice it. The next thing, if you do begin to feel pain, there are a few things you can use, right? One, I do heat. This is my wife's actually, right? Heat and ice. I alternate, right? So when I feel some soreness on one part or another part, I'll put this here, the heat, for 1 minute, and then it's just as soon as I can't take it anymore, I switch to ice. And when I can't take that anymore, I switch to heat. I alternate that back and forth for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, it's usually good. You won't feel it at the moment, but the next day, it'll be great. The other thing you have, this thing is a painful but wonderful, wonderful friend. So by using this, what you do is you place it on the ground, and you have to use this to, like I said, to circulate all around the knee. So maybe your knee hurts in the front or in the lower parts. Rolling this in that exact area, it may not help. But what you'll find is that if you sit down, and put all your body weight on it, there is a part in the knee that is especially sore. That sore part is the part you're reaching for. So you turn and you look for that sharp pain that sticks out, and you roll back and forth on that. And then you rotate it, basically like you're cooking a hot dog. Rotate it all the way around until you get every part on the inside, the front side, the back side, right? Until basically that sharp pain starts to kind of go away, that you can handle it, and then you find another part. By doing that, same thing, for about 10 minutes, and if you do that twice a week, it will get better as well. In addition to that, please don't forget some of the other exercises that we've done. The very first walk that I showed in the Step to Power video, right? The Liang Yi, when we're going up and we're going down, that is also very helpful. But the whole key is, one, take your time when you're doing your training. There's nothing to prove. Take your time at your level, at your pace, because you're going to be doing this, hopefully, for a lifetime. And everything's going to get better and easier. All the techniques will be healing. But before we get into these really deep stances, it's important that you understand that. Last note I'll say is, from time to time, I'll also use ibuprofen. Right? I know a lot of people, we don't like medicine. Of course, we're natural. But sometimes some of the swelling in there, you'll be surprised that just by taking ibuprofen for a few days, a couple times a day for a few days, then the swelling goes away and you can get back to business as normal. Don't make a habit of taking medicine. I wouldn't, because there's all these other nasty side effects that can happen. But in a hurry or in a rut, you know, get out of that rut. Okay, now let's get the video going.
Interesting enough, even though I imitate my master Wu Guozheng as much as possible in every technique, through time I found that there are distinct variations in between the way that we move. He also mentioned to me that a lot of the movements that he does don't look much like the way that his father, who taught him beforehand, Wu Jinyuan. So why the difference in techniques if we study each other? The truth is, no matter who your teacher is, your practice will in the end become your real instructor. And as you practice each movement thousands of times, your body will begin to tell you and instruct you the best way to use the postures suited to your purposes. We are all different, our bodies are different, our minds are different, and just as trees grow, even though the fruit of Bagua and my style will all be the same, no two trees will be alike. In fact, to try to imitate the movements without understanding the meaning will really lead you into a world of empty techniques. Always strive for perfection, but perfection is different for everyone. First, we're going to practice this motion standing. As I turn from my hips, my hands lower and they're guided by my feet. They point into the direction to the side. I keep my elbows in. As I twist my hips, one shoots forward, the other hand shoots back. And then pulling on those hips again, letting the feet adjust and turn as they point me into the next direction. Almost like a long stance, but a more of a relaxed long stance. So we're extending the spear hand from one side by pulling with the waist, drawing, pointing the toes in the same direction, aligning the elbows with the knees, and extending. Here we breathe in, and then here we breathe out. Now as the body begins to coil and uncoil, you'll find that one hand extends back while the other projects. The other hand can also follow, depending on what the technique is you're planning on using. But for now, let that twisting within the body, within the center, drive one hand backwards and one forwards. You should feel the push coming from your legs. As it pushes from your legs, it goes through your center and then drives the hands. So the hands are the last thing to move. This is a very safe practice, and you can slowly start to get lower and lower, but I recommend making sure that you're in a good posture before you start dropping it down. Here's the lowered step, and you'll see sometimes I take a little step to adjust to make sure I drive from that foot. There's nothing wrong with that. In Bagua, our feet are always supposed to be very limber and agile. So you never want to be stuck to the ground even though we're centered and our weight is rooted. Same thing here. Follow along that thigh, and you'll see there's a twist within the wrist. I twist the wrist along the back right before extending and pushing with the other leg. Make sure that when you stand up that your posture is correct, so you drive from that foot and you don't put any pressure on the knee. Now we're doing the same thing with the zigzag step. here I just extend out 45 degrees in one angle and then drive my elbow from the center. Make sure that you're not swinging that hand upward, but you're driving it from your heart. Put the elbow behind your heart and drive it out. Don't let your knee overextend your foot. So it's the same as the step we've done before. Now we're just going back and forth. Left into the right. Now when I turn around, I'll show you here from the side again so you can see it. 45 degrees, nice long stance, and this will really help you with stretching. It will make you a lot more flexible in that quad area for a lot more techniques. So it's not just training this technique alone. The treading spear is training many different techniques. Always remember, the legs carry the body carries the hands. So the last thing to move when it's extended is going to be the hands. Projecting everything in the same angle. My feet point in the direction that my hands need to go in. Toes and hands are aligned. Elbows and knees. Hips and shoulders. Here's a review of the multi-step. I hope you don't get tired of seeing these reviews because I'm always going to give them to you. I want to make sure you're lined up before we start doing something, especially like a deep treading step. Doing it forward first and then going backwards. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. By this time, I hope that you've gotten really familiar with this step. It should almost be automatic as we get deeper into this program. Now we're doing the multi-step with the treading spear. First I do a kobu 1, sink my weight down as I extend so none of that pressure goes on my knee, and extend all the way out. Once again, kobu, sink the weight down onto the hip. That way it stretches you out nicely as those hands extend, one forward and one backward. Keep your shoulders pressed down and you'll feel the position of the posture where those hands are supposed to be released at. Everything is twisting, so there's a twist within your hips. There's also a twist within your wrists and your elbows as it extends. We'll speed this up just a little bit later on, but it's not important to do all these techniques fast. You should be able to be fluent, but it's really important that you are in a correct posture before you try to do anything more difficult or more strenuous on the body. In fact, none of these techniques should feel strenuous at all. If it feels, you're going to get tired, but if you start to feel like there's really a stress somewhere, especially in the joint, then you really need to slow down, raise your practice up, and try it again. Here it is again. This time I'm going to do it a little more fluid. Let it extend all the way out. When we turn around, we just do a kobu and face the other direction. It's easy enough to do. Try to make sure you get full extension every time as you go into your target. The point is not to get low, but to have power in a low position. So what you're doing now is much like lifting weights. You're practicing having a strong stride in that direction. Here's the second version where I do a cross block first. I raise the hands up, then they come down as I extend my foot out in that 45-degree angle. You'll see my hands here now are inverted as they drop down, whereas in the other one they're doing 2 spear hands. So this is a different version of it. And honestly, this one's a little bit easier to use for combat. This one's more for a strike. Of course, it can be used for takedowns and locks too. Here it is from the side. But the spear hand incorporates more you're swimming into the defense of the opponent, finding his openings, and going into a takedown. Make sure as you sink your weight, your hands rise up naturally just off of that dantian. You're basically using that springing downward force to spring the hands upward. Pace it with your breathing, up and exhale. Now, I recommend trying these positions, a lot of them sometimes. Just sit down so you can really focus on the technique. And even though you're sitting down, you'll see I'll let my legs still try to follow the direction of my body. But here I can really focus on my twisting. So as my hand extends out from one direction, when it pulls back from the waist, it twists along my backside while the other hand rides under it. In Bagua, adverse to other styles, you'll see that we do some leaning, but it's always aligned with our dantian. This kind of a swimming motion, making sure the eyes are following those hands, or basically leading the hands so that you drive all of that power from the body. Sometimes I'll do this at work when nobody's paying attention, and then I can isolate just one part of that movement, which we'll do again later on. Isolating one part of the movement lets you really understand it when you're trying to put it all together. Sometimes so many moving components makes it difficult to understand how it works in one piece. And of course, I can emphasize different parts of that winding and unwinding. Now we're going to be piecing together some of these techniques here. So with the treading, you can see I'm going to go just one side and then to the other side. And I can do this higher too. I'm going to skip the middle part, the forward spear hand, and just go one side to the other, because what you need to make sure you can do is to get into this posture quickly and easily and comfortably. It shouldn't feel like a big move. If it still feels like a big move, then you're not going to be able to use it for anything really. So sometimes just practicing this over and over is a great way to stretch. Find your position and alignment. Now we're going to do it with a little bit of clockwork, which means I just keep adjusting my foot and I drive in that direction. So this creates fluidity in the foot, so I know exactly where to step to get into that posture again. I'll do it going one way. And once you make your completion in that, you start going the other way. This is all very important footwork practice. Keep the shoulders pressed down and let the body extend. Now, resistance training is important. This will help you strengthen that power positioning in a lower stance. So a lot of times I'll find a pulley, just like my wife's exercise ropes, and I'll pull on those, and first you isolate the technique. So just practice this part, keeping your center aligned, your elbows behind your heart. And so when you drive out, you should feel that you're pushing from your foot all the way into your hand. If you're just using your hand, you'll know right away. So slow down and make sure that you feel that all of this pressure is on the center and the lower body, and the rest of the body is basically locked into place. Here it is on the other side. Now we do the lower half of this movement, the uncoiling there. And there I just want to make sure I'm in a good position and I'm getting enough resistance. But make sure you don't skip that rotating throughout the body that leads through the wrist, the elbows, into the fingertips. Don't skip that rotating. Take your time. There's no point in doing any of this fast. On the other side, the same thing. Always make sure you're training to get a good balance in the body. Never practice anything on one side alone. You may have one side that you favor that's preferable, but you should always be training it. Otherwise, your muscles and your joints will all go out of balance. Here, using the straight sword, I'm doing the exact same posture. I'm just focusing on my coiling and dropping down to a slow, piercing strike to the lower body. Keep that circle going and really feel that drive. Let your center drive right into the tip of that blade. That lets you know that sometimes these weapons are not just good for combat, but they really can help you focus your accuracy and your precision and technique. Here I do it on the left side. Like I said, don't let anything get out of balance. Of course, you're going to have one side that's better than the other, but sometimes you'll find that certain techniques will work better on your offhand. Now we're doing it from the front to the back, so we're doing the full motion. First I strike, and then drop my weight to the other side. Sometimes if you don't have a lot of time to practice, doing this for just a half hour can really help you make some serious gains. Look at the blade, and the blade will tell you where your positioning is, or if you're off. And you'll see I like to practice in confined areas. It really helps me to make sure I'm more precise with my movements. Drive with the whole body. Let the body drive the weapon, not your hand. And now we're doing it with the cross block. Here I'll do it with the right hand holding the sword. And now I could switch and alternate every time, which you should understand happens naturally. But this goes into a slice or a press. And then when I switch hands, now it's a hand press. Of course, you could trade sides with the sword. But that pretty much concludes our exercise. I hope you enjoyed this week. Please practice safely. It's a tough technique, and next week we'll go into applications.